The announcement was only 3 sentences long, but its meaning struck like a public verdict. Prince William had authorized a new Crown Estate protocol, and Meghan's name was nowhere inside it. She would receive no invitations, hold no ceremonial role, and attend no official event connected to the estate. What appeared to be an administrative decision was something far more personal, a boundary drawn by the future king, in public, with no path around it. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Meghan stared at the page. The Crown Estate, a property portfolio managed independently to support the monarchy's public finances, had introduced a protocol covering receptions, tenant ceremonies, environmental launches, heritage commemorations, charity visits, and gatherings on estate property. That explanation sounded administrative. The consequence was not. William had approved a directive removing her from every official guest list, ceremonial appearance, private reception, and estate-supported engagement. Her hand stopped above the paper. She read the authorization, found the prince's name beneath it, and slowly turned the page face down. Harry watched and understood the meaning before either spoke. This was not a cancelled invitation. It was a declaration that the institution no longer recognized Meghan as someone permitted inside its official spaces, when an event appeared social, charitable, or connected to causes she once represented. Harry reached for the document, but she held it down. The protocol, a formal rule guiding royal events, contained one clause sharper than the rest. It barred former senior representatives, whose presence might create confusion, regarding constitutional or ceremonial standing. Constitutional standing meant recognized authority within the monarchy's public structure. Ceremonial standing meant the right to appear in an official royal capacity. The language left no gap, no family exception, and no quiet route back. Then Meghan noticed what the directive did not say. Harry's name was absent. His access would be judged separately, event by event, while hers had been closed completely. She looked at him and asked whether William was trying to divide them. He could not answer. The silence made the possibility feel real. The future king had not merely excluded her. He had created a path Harry might still walk alone. Before Meghan could choose between a public fight and silence, Harry's phone vibrated. A former palace aide had sent a written message stating that the announcement was only the final step in a decision William had been building for months. But to understand why William chose such a sweeping and public boundary, the story must move beyond the announcement and into the private wounds carried by the 4 people now trapped inside it. Behind the protocol stood 4 people who understood the decision in completely different ways. Meghan saw rejection. Harry saw another door closing between him and his brother. William saw protection of the crown, of Catherine, and of a future he believed could no longer survive blurred lines. Charles saw something more dangerous, a family dispute becoming royal policy. None of them entered this moment untouched, and none could pretend the consequences were merely ceremonial. Meghan turned from the table, but the question followed her into the sitting room. She asked Harry whether his brother was trying to erase her from royal history. He hesitated. That pause cut deeper than the directive, because she had once stood at royal events as a central figure, served public causes, and believed leaving formal duties did not mean losing every connection to service. Harry reached for an answer, yet nothing sounded honest. William's position as Prince of Wales, the title held by the monarch's direct heir, gave him growing authority over estate-linked engagements. Every invitation carried meaning. It could signal representation, suggest restored legitimacy, or place someone close to the crown. Harry understood the concern, but he understood what the rule had done to his wife. At Windsor, William sat with Catherine before signing the briefing note, a formal document setting out the decision and its reasons. She asked whether the restriction had to be absolute. He tightened his grip on the pen and admitted it would hurt Harry. Still, the prince believed another blurred arrangement would reopen every argument, forcing his wife back into comparison and pushing the monarchy into confusion. Catherine watched him sign, then asked whether Charles had been heard. The king had urged his son to preserve one narrow path for family attendance at non-political occasions, meaning gatherings without official constitutional purpose. William refused. He feared one exception would be presented as restored royal standing, and the future king would again lose control of the meaning attached to Meghan's presence. Harry opened a consultation file sent by the former aide. Catherine's name appeared inside, but her comments were redacted, covered to hide confidential wording. He could not tell whether she had defended Meghan, supported William, or warned both sides against escalation. The uncertainty disturbed him because her position could explain whether this was protection, punishment, or something more personal. Then the former aide identified the buried incident that had changed everything. A confrontation during a Crown Estate conservation ceremony, where one sentence had turned William's caution into certainty. The exclusion had not begun with a document or a public statement. It began on a windswept estate platform, where one unexpected exchange turned suspicion into a point of no return. Months before the exclusion became public, a carefully managed ceremony on Crown Estate land had ended with one sentence no one could take back. The guests saw polite smiles, measured applause, and the familiar discipline of royal appearances. Behind a closed reception room door, however, William confronted Meghan over a private conversation that had already reached the press. What happened next convinced him that future access would not create reconciliation. It would create another battlefield. The trouble began at the Highgrove Coastal Stewardship Ceremony, an estate-supported gathering created to celebrate conservation partnerships and youth environmental projects. A stewardship ceremony was simply a formal event honoring people responsible for protecting land, communities, and natural resources. Meghan attended as a private family guest, not as a working royal, and William approved the arrangement only after limits were agreed. Meghan understood those limits. No interviews, no media briefing, no photographs suggesting a return to official duty. Yet during the reception, she told a charity patron that she hoped the visit might become the beginning of a more modern partnership with the family. The remark sounded personal in the room. Within an hour, a correspondent repeated it during a broadcast as proof that she was preparing to resume royal public life. William heard the report before the ceremony ended. He found her near the reception room doors and asked why private family access had once again become a public narrative. Meghan's expression hardened. She insisted she had authorized nothing, then accused him of deciding she was guilty before asking what had been said. The argument sharpened. He replied that intention no longer changed the result. Every appearance created claims the palace then had to deny. She answered that his suspicion had become a prison, one built so tightly that even innocent words could be used against her. A staff member later produced an audio recording from the reception. It confirmed Meghan had used the phrase, but had never mentioned returning to royal duty. Someone else had stretched her words. Still, William focused on the danger. Her presence could be reshaped into a constitutional message before anyone could stop it. Catherine entered as their voices rose. She saw William gripping the event schedule, while Meghan stood shaken near the door. The princess asked both of them to stop. He lowered the paper, but his decision had already hardened. This arrangement, he said, could never happen again. Meghan refused to let one distorted sentence define her forever. Days later, she sent a written request for a face-to-face meeting with William. The request reaches Windsor without advisors, conditions, or carefully prepared statements, and forces William and Meghan into the confrontation both had spent months avoiding. There were no cameras inside the Windsor drawing room, no press officers to soften the language, and no aides positioned between them. Meghan arrived determined to challenge the decision directly. William entered carrying no papers. For several seconds, neither sat down. The silence between them held years of accusation. Loyalty questioned, intentions doubted, private pain turned into public controversy. Then Meghan asked the one question he could not answer without exposing the truth. Was this about the crown, or was it about me? Meghan had requested the meeting through Charles, not Harry. She believed a direct conversation might stop the dispute from becoming another permanent rupture between the brothers. The king carried the request privately, but William agreed only under strict conditions. No recording, no representatives, no later statement quoting the exchange, and no assumption that the protocol, a formal rule controlling official access, would be reversed. Meghan remained standing. "You don't get to define me as a threat every time I enter a royal room," she said. William answered that the issue was not her identity, but the meaning repeatedly attached to her presence. One appearance became a rumor. One private sentence became a claim of restored status. One family invitation became a public argument the monarchy was forced to answer. Her restraint broke. She accused him of turning family estrangement into institutional punishment, using royal authority to settle a wound he refused to name. The prince's composure slipped. He said private access had been offered before, yet each attempt returned as another dispute over recognition, position, or what the palace supposedly owed them. Then Meghan exposed what she knew. Charles had proposed a limited exception for non-political gatherings, events without official constitutional purpose, and William had overruled him. She asked why a son could silence the monarch. He stared at her, suddenly aware that confidential consultation details had escaped the palace. William chose honesty over denial. He admitted the restriction was also meant to protect Catherine from another cycle of comparison, accusation, and forced reconciliation. The princess had carried years of pressure quietly, and he would not place her inside that theater again. For him, protecting his wife had become inseparable from protecting the future crown she would one day stand beside. Meghan heard only the verdict beneath his words. She had become the permanent danger, the person everyone else required protection from. She pulled her chair back, met his eyes, and warned that the public would eventually learn who truly controlled the decision, and why even Charles could not stop it. Her warning leads directly to the machinery behind William's authority, where family wishes carry emotional weight, but legal control belongs to those prepared to exercise it. The exclusion carried William's name, but it had not been created by anger alone. Behind it stood legal advisors, estate governors, communications officials, and one constitutional principle the palace could not ignore: attendance could imply authority. Charles remained sovereign, yet the Prince of Wales had been granted operational control over a widening field of estate engagements. The father could ask for mercy. The son could decide that mercy created a risk the monarchy could no longer afford. William entered the confidential Crown Estate Events Committee, knowing the decision would reach beyond one guest list. The committee was a small decision-making group responsible for separating private family attendance from formal royal representation. That distinction mattered because an appearance beside senior royals could be read across the world as restored status, especially at events funded, hosted, or branded through estate partnerships. The warning was blunt. Meghan's presence would not be treated as casual. Broadcasters would question whether she had returned. Charities would assume a renewed role. Foreign officials might interpret one reception as a constitutional signal. William listened as advisors described the confusion, but he also knew every line on the page carried a human cost. Charles read the final recommendation alone in his private study. He removed his glasses, circled the phrase "universal exclusion," and remained silent. Then the king asked whether a son must always choose the hardest possible boundary. William answered that uncertainty had already damaged trust on every side. Affection, he said, could not become ceremonial access whenever guilt entered the room. The earlier draft revealed something harsher. It excluded both Meghan and Harry. William personally changed the wording, allowing his brother to receive case-by-case invitations as the monarch's son, while barring her as a former working representative with no current constitutional role. A case-by-case invitation meant each appearance would be judged separately rather than guaranteed. Charles understood the legal logic, but the emotional meaning disturbed him. He warned that separating the couple would look like an attempt to bring Harry back without his wife. The prince neither confirmed nor denied it. He simply placed the amended page above the committee's recommendation and signed. For William, the distinction protected the crown's authority. For Charles, it exposed a family fracture that official language could explain, but never make less painful to anyone involved. The consequence arrived almost immediately. Meghan's name disappeared from an environmental reception she had privately expected to attend. Harry's remained. Days later, one formal envelope left the palace bearing only his name. The protocol was no longer an argument hidden inside palace rooms. It had entered their marriage in the form of a single envelope, addressed to only one of them. The invitation arrived without ceremony. Harry's name appeared in raised lettering above the Crown Estate crest, followed by the date of a Windsor environmental reception. Meghan's name was absent. No companion line, no private qualification, no handwritten explanation. The envelope sat between them on the table, like a test neither had requested. William's decision had finally become physical, something Harry could accept, reject, or tear apart, but could no longer pretend was merely political. Meghan opened the envelope first. The Windsor environmental reception was the first major estate event held under the revised protocol, making Harry's invitation the clearest test of how the new boundary would work. A reception was a formal gathering where invited guests met royal representatives and supported a public cause. This one mattered because accepting it would show whether family access could continue without including his wife. She read only Harry's name and slid the card across the table before finishing the note. Her voice stayed calm as she asked whether he intended to go without her. The restraint made the question heavier. Meghan had already discussed the event with an environmental organizer and believed she might attend privately because of her past interest in community-based sustainability work. Harry looked again. He said attending could place him close enough to confront William without advisors controlling the exchange. Meghan answered that walking through the gate alone would validate the separation the protocol had created. The prince would gain his brother's presence, while the institution demonstrated that she could be removed without losing him. Then Harry noticed the handwriting beneath the printed details. Charles had added a request for a brief conversation after the reception. The king's line changed the meaning of the invitation. It was not merely ceremonial, it appeared to be an attempt to reopen direct contact between father and son, while Meghan remained outside. Her phone vibrated before either could decide. A former royal patron sent a documented message explaining that two charities had been advised not to list Meghan as a possible guest at any estate-connected function. The exclusion had spread beyond one reception. It now reached the causes she believed could preserve some connection to the service she once performed. Harry folded the note. He declined the invitation without issuing a statement, refusing to turn the decision into another public performance. But silence did not mean surrender. He called William directly, prepared to accuse him of dividing a marriage to repair a broken brotherhood, and neither could hide behind official language. For the first time, the dispute moves away from protocols, advisors, and competing public roles, leaving only two brothers speaking, without anyone else to absorb the pain. Harry did not call as a duke, and William did not answer as the heir. For one fragile conversation, they were simply two brothers, carrying years of resentment into the same silence. Harry accused him of humiliating Meghan. William accused him of making every private compromise impossible to contain. Then the anger weakened. Beneath it lay something neither had admitted: the fear that any reunion would be exploited, misunderstood, or destroyed before it had the chance to become real. Harry shut the door before speaking. No advisors waited beside him, and William stepped away from an estate briefing, dismissing his staff so nothing could be recorded, summarized, or softened by officials. The protocol, the prince explained, governed formal crown estate access, meaning appearances connected to the monarchy's official property events, not private family contact. "Hi, I am Hadi, and I am your voice." Every family doorway, he said, now seemed guarded by rules, invitations, and conditions. William answered that boundaries had become necessary because private gestures repeatedly returned as public claims. One brother heard control, the other heard survival. Then Harry asked the question both had avoided. Did William want him back only if he arrived alone? The future king paused long enough for the silence to become painful. "I want my brother back, but I cannot rebuild trust by pretending nothing happened." William's voice lowered. He confessed that he expected Harry to refuse most invitations under the new arrangement. Separating their names had not been designed to punish Meghan, he said, but to stop the door from closing permanently on his brother. Harry heard the intention, yet he could not ignore the suffering it created inside his marriage. Harry revealed Meghan's fear through a private conversation they had shared after the invitation arrived. She believed the exclusion was meant to isolate her. William did not deny understanding that danger. He admitted he had approved the protocol anyway, because institutional clarity, clear rules about who could represent the crown, had become more urgent than emotional fairness. The confession changed the argument. Harry asked for one concession, a private written explanation confirming that Meghan was barred from official representation, not rejected as a member of the wider family. William agreed without bargaining. For the first time, neither brother sounded victorious. Neither knew someone beyond the room was already watching the compromise. But the fragile agreement never remained private. Before the letter reached Harry and Meghan, its wording was leaked to a broadcaster, turning a quiet act of clarity into a worldwide judgment. By morning, the brothers' most private compromise had become a headline, and the world was ready to decide who had been protected, who had been punished, and who had finally gone too far. The story escaped the palace before breakfast and crossed the world before noon. Commentators called it discipline, cruelty, constitutional clarity, and calculated revenge. Yet one image captured the argument more powerfully than any debate. Outside Windsor Castle, a newspaper seller held up a front page showing Meghan on one side, William on the other, and 4 words across the center: "The Crown closes the gate." Behind him, a crowd gathered beneath the castle walls and began choosing sides. Meghan watched the first television panel in silence. The leaked letter separated her place in the wider family from any right to appear in a representative or semi-official role. A representative role meant attending as someone publicly connected to the Crown's authority, while a semi-official role meant appearing informally but still carrying the appearance of royal approval. That distinction mattered, because one invitation could be treated as a restoration of status. The panel grew harsher. One commentator called Meghan a former royal seeking the privileges of a current one. She reached for the remote and switched off the screen. Harry remained beside her, angry not only at the words, but at how quickly a private attempt at clarity had been turned into a verdict on her character. Outside Windsor, the London Chronicle front page dominated the gathering. Supporters raised signs reading, "Protect the institution." Critics answered with, "Family is not a protocol." Palace communications staff refused to discuss the private letter, yet they confirmed that the event's protocol remained unchanged. The confirmation removed any hope that the exclusion had been misunderstood, misquoted, or temporary. William watched the crowd on a muted television. The policy had been designed to reduce confusion, but it had created a new symbol of royal division. Catherine found him standing motionless. She asked whether clarity still counted as success when it caused this much pain. He did not answer immediately, and she understood that the question had reached him. Then a broadcaster revealed the source of another hidden struggle through a documented palace briefing. Charles had requested that the letter be released officially to soften the decision and protect Meghan from the harshest interpretation. William refused. Publishing private family reasoning, he argued, would reward the same cycle of disclosure that had destroyed earlier compromises. Catherine warned that silence would let anger define the decision forever. The prince made one final choice. He would not reverse the exclusion, but he would issue a direct statement explaining what the boundary meant and what it did not. The final verdict would not come from the shouting crowd or the breaking headlines, but from the boundary William was prepared to defend after every illusion had fallen away. William did not apologize for the exclusion, and Meghan did not pretend it had caused anything less than profound hurt. There would be no dramatic reversal, no staged reunion, and no carefully photographed restoration. Instead, the future king offered a final distinction. Family relationships could remain personal, but crown representation required trust, consistency, and consent. The verdict was painful because it satisfied no one completely. Yet for the first time, every person involved understood exactly where the boundary stood. William released a statement before the next gathering. The Crown Estate was the property network whose income supported royal finances, while constitutional participation meant appearing with recognized authority for the monarchy. He confirmed that events would remain reserved for serving representatives, invited public partners, and relatives whose presence could not reasonably be mistaken for restored duty. The prince drew one final line. The policy did not erase Meghan from the wider family, forbid private contact, or stop her visiting relatives away from formal estate programs. It closed only the official path, yet that path had once carried her service, status, and belief that she belonged near the institution. Meghan read the statement alone before joining Harry. She admitted the language felt less personal than the original protocol, but she would not call it compassionate or fair. He answered with his decision. While the exclusion remained universal, he would attend no Crown Estate event without her. She took his hand, not in triumph, but because his position was unmistakable. William sent the promised private explanation without conditions. Inside it, the future king added one handwritten sentence. This boundary is not a judgment on your worth. It is a decision about the role the crown can recognize. Meghan kept the letter. She did not reply, because understanding the reasoning did not remove the wound. Charles accepted what affection had failed to solve. The king placed the protocol in a closed folder and told his son that clarity might protect the institution, but it could not protect everyone inside it from pain. William heard the warning and did not look away. The verdict was complete. The exclusion succeeded institutionally and failed emotionally. It gave the monarchy a rule, gave William control, gave Harry a choice, and gave Meghan certainty. It also confirmed that her return to official royal life had ended. The gate did not close on Meghan's identity, her marriage, or her voice. It closed on her royal role, and in choosing clarity over reconciliation, the crown preserved its authority while accepting the permanent emotional price. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.